Now, as we wait another minute or two for people to come in, if you're in here and you want to do something other than listen to us just chit chat, and you've already got all your wines open and you've already got all your cheeses open, go to this Menti poll, which is at www.menti.com, and you can enter manually that 8-digit code that you see in the top right of your screen, or you can access by a QR code. We've got a couple questions here that we're just going to have you all answer so we can learn a bit about you and we can share some interesting information. We will not be looking at the answers until somewhere around the halfway point of our program. And at that point, we'll give people a chance to fill out the questions again if they haven't had the opportunity yet. But we figured we'd let you get a head start if you're just like rearing to go. So go ahead and fill that out if you'd like, but make sure you pause here when you get to the slide that says pause here, because the rest of the questions are for later in the program. All right, we're at 5:03. I just realized that because I'm sharing my screen, I'm unable to see our agenda. So I think at this point is when I'm supposed to start. Thank you, Kat. All right, thank you everybody for joining. If you are looking for the geology of wine and cheese, you've come to the right place. If you are looking for a place to drink wine and eat cheese with friends, you came to the right place. And if you're looking for a place to learn about how caves influence wine and cheese, you've come to the right place. Finally, if you were just bored and you want to hang out with some cool people, you came to the right place. So thank you for coming. I know everybody wants to get immediately to the tasting part. We do have a little bit to go through first. We got to introduce each other and just explain how today's event's going to work. But I know that I cannot stop you from starting to sample your cheese and wine. So I wanted to start off with our experts to just briefly tell you how to do your tasting as you start nibbling and sipping when I talk. So go ahead, Kathleen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And just some first steps to tasting I wanted to address before we all get started lecturing and participating. Of course, we want to be nibbling and tasting. First step is tempering, right? We want to take our cheeses out of refrigeration. We want to give them even just a few minutes to sit out of refrigeration. 20 minutes is ideal, but if they go a little longer, that's totally fine. If you just are finding yourself taking them out now, that's okay too, because there's so many things that we have to get through and talk through. So there will be time for these cheeses to kind of relax and become more expressive in their aromas. I'm sure as you were getting your cheeses out, you were noticing some different fragrances. They're only going to get stronger as we progress. So you should definitely at least prioritize taking out the first 2 cheeses that we're tasting through tonight. So your Camembert, your soft bloomy rind style cheese, and your Gruyere, get those unwrapped. We can wait 15 minutes to unwrap the other 2 later on. That's totally fine if you don't have room or if you're getting overwhelmed with all the different aromas. You might need a utensil like a cheese knife, a towel, so you can kind of cut yourselves pieces as you want. And then the progression is just going from mild to wild. So we're going to start with a soft Camembert style cheese, progressing in firmer and harder and more robust flavors, just so we don't overwhelm our palate. So at Murray's, that's kind of how we like to taste cheese when we're studying them and evaluating them. And you can definitely refresh your palates with some still water or a mild sea salt cracker if you find yourself getting a little fatigued from tasting. You can even take a little nibble of like a pickle or something to kind of wake up your palate as well. That's totally fine too. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about some other things as well, but really just the goal for tasting and evaluating cheese tonight is to use all of our senses. So that's it from me. Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, and I believe William is going to give us a brief introduction as to what to do as you sip your wine, because you just can't wait.
Yeah, so I think you can start to open like your Chardonnay, like an unopened Chardonnay, and you know, don't drink all of it, but you know, because save something for later, because I want to explain more about the wine. And so this is just so we're going to use all our sense. So from taking a look, so opening the bottle and try to pour some wine in your glass, and then you know. Make opening the flavors and take a look to the colors and start to smell it. and then try to take a sip and make it flowing all around your tongue, because as you can see, like your tongue has a lot of parts that need to be sensing this wine. So I think we're gonna start with the Chardonnay, and then we're gonna progress with other wines, and I look forward to it. I think I don't want to be talking too much. Maybe later during our tasting time.
Thank you very much, William. All right, let's just do a couple quick things before we dig into the tasting. Most importantly, we need to thank everybody who helped plan this event. Not only do the 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 8 faces that you see today, not only did those people contribute to this event, but there was lots of additional people behind the scenes that have put a lot into this event today. It is an incredible amount of effort to combine the knowledge and passion of all of these experts and non-experts who are just lovers. And so thank you so much to everybody. You'll mostly be hearing from 4 of the 5 panelists listed here today. We do have a change in our program. So unfortunately, Josh will not be joining us today, but we did want to acknowledge a lot of effort he put into putting these materials together. And so you'll hear a lot from the panelists. You won't hear as much from the committee members working in the background. So committee members, could you just briefly unmute yourself, make sure your cameras are on and say hello. And those committee members that are working tirelessly behind the scenes today include Kat Gould, Stefano Mazzoni, and Dan Kelleher. Hello, guys.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thanks for joining.
Yes, and thank you. You will hear from them a bit, but I just wanted to give them a brief chance to say hello. All right, what's next? The agenda. So today we will be doing the brief introductions and logistics that I've already started. We will then dig into our educational tasting. As you probably know, there are 4 paired tastings. For each tasting, we will discuss the cheese on its own. We will discuss the wine. We will discuss how they pair. And then finally, we will discuss the geology, specifically the geology of caves and how it influences the creation of those cheeses and wines. Throughout our program and in between each tasting, we will have a palate cleanser. This is a chance for you to physically cleanse your palate with some red and some water, but we'll also be throwing some interesting tidbits your way. This could be knowledge, it could be audience engagement. So go ahead and stay tuned for those while you cleanse your palate. Finally, we will end with Q&A with the expert panelists. So we'll also hopefully have some time for Q&A throughout the program. So we're hopefully not going to just wait until the end. And then we have our happy hour at the end, which is sometimes the most exciting part of our programs. Most of this event is in Zoom. I think at this point of the global pandemic, most of us are pretty familiar with Zoom, but just in case you're wondering which aspects of Zoom we will be using today, you have we have lots of access through the chat. And again, we highly encourage everybody to hit up the chat, talk to each other, engage. We also have the Q&A box available. And so you can ask questions in the Q&A. We do highly suggest putting your questions in the Q&A box. It makes it easier for us to access. We will try to catch questions that are dropped in the chat as well. And when you ask a question, if it is aimed at a specific panelist, please make sure to say the panelist's name, or if it's about cheese specifically, make sure to clarify that, or if it's about a certain wine, make sure to clarify that, because we'd like to make sure we get your questions answered. Oh, and one more thing. You should have already seen the notification, but just in case you missed it, this event is being recorded and will be shared on the AAPG Women's Network's YouTube channel, which is where we host all of our previous recordings, including the Geology of Beer event and our first Geology of Wine event, which was at this point about 3/4 of a year ago. All right, let's transition into the tasting and meet our lovely panelists. And I believe Dan is going to make some introductions. Still muted. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Hey, our first panelist today is Chris Piela, but after Chris gives her session, then Kathleen will come on, and Tiffany, and then William. And if you guys don't mind, after Chris after I introduce Chris, would you guys kind of introduce yourselves, please? Our first expert panelist today is Chris Piela, who is an accomplished exploration geologist with BP. And after talking with Chris to help me prepare this introduction, I learned about her work in prospect development at BP and the process of seismic mapping and integrating well log data. Is that cool or what? I can tell she loves what she does and she's very good at it. Chris earned her bachelor's degree in the University of Miami, Florida, specializing in carbonate geology. She got her master's degree from Texas A&M. So it's no wonder she's recognized for her work as an exploration geologist. Now, Chris is uniquely qualified to teach us today about the geology of wine and cheese, because not only is she a geologist, but her and her husband, Chris and her husband, own and operate a productive vineyard near the Texas-Louisiana state border. It's called Pineywood's Vineyard, and it's a showcase property, partly because it's the only one located in the national forest. Now, in case you're wondering, the reason it's there, it's because that property has been in their family for generations. Chris knows a thing or two about how geology relates to wine. At this time, please help me welcome, broadcasting from beautiful East Texas, Chris Piela.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I would love to introduce Kathleen, who is the assistant manager of the core curriculum at Murray's in New York, and she's on their national cheese team. And until we met her and Josh, and that's when I knew I had chosen the wrong career, because the cheese professional definitely sounds like a really good job. She's training cheesemongers worldwide. She teaches online courses, and now we have to guess what her favorite cheese is. So if you would type in the chat what kind of cheese you think that is, and then she can tell us if we're right or not.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy and honored to be here speaking to you all. I just wanted to give a huge thanks to Josh Windsor, my colleague, who was instrumental in helping me prepare to be here with you all this evening. And yes, I am a certified cheese professional. I do train cheesemongers nationwide in our Kroger family of Murray shops across the country. I do have a favorite cheese, and I thought it would be fun to see if you could guess what I'm pictured with there. And it is Parmigiano-Reggiano. It's one of my favorite cheeses of all time. You can see an aging facility of Parmigiano-Reggiano on the left, easily over $1 million worth of cheese in that photo there. Thousands of wheels are stacked on pine shelves, floor to ceiling, 30 feet high, 16 months average. These wheels are very heavy, about 40 kilos. So there's a lot of cheese in that room. And yes, that is a cheese robot turning and brushing those wheels just to get through everyone and keep up with the demand, because it's one of our favorites here in the States. So that's me. Thank you so much again. And I'd like to introduce Tiffany Farrell next.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Tiffany, and I am a winemaker and outside sales manager for Haak Vineyards and Winery, which is in Santa Fe, Texas. That's in Galveston County, about 30 minutes south of Houston. And there's a picture of our winery there to the left. And I'm so excited about this tasting today. I recently, my fiance and I went to experience a cheese cave I didn't even know one existed in Dublin, Texas. And so I have a mental image of what we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm really excited to be sharing the wine component. So thank you for having me. And then I would like to introduce William Nardin.
Thank you. Thank you for Nardin, because it's really important. I'm Italian, so it's not Nardin, it's Nardin. So anyway, so thank you, Tiffany. So I'm currently an assistant professor at University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, specifically at On Point Lab. And I work in ecology and geomorphology, even I've trained as an environmental engineer in Rome, in Italy. And I grew up in my family place, which was like my family owned for more than 20 years, vineyards, and I grew up surrounded by people like working in the field, to harvesting and during all the seasons. So this is the passion that moved me to also take the intro level for sommelier, because it's really my passion. And I think it's a travel to try all these different wines, and it's so important for me. So I really like it. So anyway, but I like to, this kind of joint program, I would say, with the studying earth science or geology and investigating, exploring this wine world is something really important. I also postdoc all around the US, from Indiana University, Boston University, in Berkeley. And then at the end, I got this position in Maryland where, you know, it's in the Eastern Shore. It's good to, I like it so far. So thank you. I think Rebecca is yours again, right?
She's
Yep,
on.
it is Chris's
It's delayed. Okay, super exciting. So sip your Chardonnay and get your cheese ready. So caves have been around for nearly, wine caves specifically, caves have been around a lot longer. So wine caves have been around for over 7,000 years, and the Nat Geo recently published a paper about a cave that was found in Armenia. And then later Roman territories ended up using caves to store wine. Caves and caverns maintain a constant temperature in the mid-50s Fahrenheit, along with constant humidity, which is what makes them so important for long-term storage and aging of things like wine and cheese, which are perishable. So you can see on the bottom, that's modern, how we store stuff. So now these caves are used as like event venues. People have like weddings and dinner parties down in them. You can see on the bottom right, more like what I mentally think of when you think of a wine cave. And up on the top on the right, that's actually from France. That's a picture of storage in old Roman mines, and we'll talk about that more later. Okay, next slide. Here we go.
Okay, so we're going to start with Kathleen, who's going to introduce us to our first pairing.
Yes, everyone, if you would be so kind as to take out your Hudson Valley Camembert. If you don't have Hudson Valley Camembert, that is okay. You should have a soft ripened cheese or a brie style cheese in front of you. I actually have a cheese called Fromage Dauphinois. It's another double cream, bloomy rinded cheese, as they call them. But your cheese, you might have a small format round or a square if you're enjoying the Hudson Valley Camembert. Basically, for opening this and preparing to taste it, you can go ahead and cut it just like maybe you would slice yourself a piece of pie, especially if you're cutting from a circle. You can kind of cut yourself out a little wedge from the center. Even if you have a butter knife, that's perfectly acceptable for cutting softer cheeses. Take a sniff of that freshly cut piece of cheese as you're separating it from your larger piece or your wheel. When you get a piece of cheese like that and take it away from the larger piece, like that instant cut, you're expressing a lot of those volatile kind of molecules that are floating off the surface of the food itself. It's really similar to swirling a glass of wine. So if you can, break apart your cheese and take a little whiff, that's really what you want to do. Hudson Valley Camembert is Old Chatham Creamery's flagship bloomy rinded cheese. It's actually made with a blend of milks, primarily cow's milk. However, what's really important for this is that it's a soft ripened cheese. So this is a type of cheese whose texture softens during aging through the action of starter cultures that are added. They include molds, yeast, or bacteria, for example, but basically these microbes are growing on the surface, the outside of the cheese, and they're ripening it from the outside in. Hence why you see a bloomy rinded cheese, as they call them, with this kind of downy white, velvety white jacket and a kind of smooth and buttery paste. That outside is very important for the tasting experience. Eating a little bit of the rind like this with the whole piece of cheese, I think makes for a really important taste experience. But we are going to address the historical origins of this cheese shortly. But just to kind of give you some background on traditional Camembert, which hails exclusively from Normandy in northern France. First references of Camembert were made in the 1700s. By that time, France was well on their way to defining cheese-making traditions. They were using caves. They were making man-made caves to store their cheeses. Now, by this time, you're seeing more commercial production as opposed to the cheese staying in one village. Going way back to the 7th century, traditional French brie has said to been dated back and found much earlier than Camembert. So the story I'll go into the story of how the connection is between these two cheeses, but let's just take a second to revisit Tasting 101 here. Wanting to use all of our senses to evaluate Camembert, you're looking at it right away in a healthy rind of a bloomy rinded cheese. It should be very kind of clean. You might be seeing little flecks of like slightly gray gray or brown mold around the edges, and that's perfectly normal, especially in Camembert, but the rind should be very smooth and clean, somewhat dry. This is a flowery rind or a bloomy rind cheese. Why do we call it that? Because under a microscope, this rind would look like it was transforming before your eyes, like millions of flowers blooming. That's thanks to the specific cultures that are introduced to kind of cultivate the rind on this iconic style of cheese. As you're touching the cheese, it should feel quite soft. That rind should, as I mentioned, feel kind of velvety. There should be a little bit of mushroomy kind of aroma coming off the surface and of the rind specifically. And then when you taste it all together, you should be getting kind of a buttery, salty experience, as well as a little bit of like button mushrooms from eating the rind. What's really important to note is the difference between taste and flavor. I know William was kind of mentioning this earlier in tasting wine. It's very similar for tasting cheese. Taste is a sense, where flavor is that multi-sensory experience. So on our tongues, we can experience the 5 tastes: sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and umami. But aroma, you know, our sense of smell accounts for like almost 90% of what we taste. That's thanks to that process known as retronasal olfaction. Humans can perceive at least 1 trillion aromas just in our noses. So when you take any one of those and you combine it with any one of our 5 taste perceptors, that's really what's going to help you experience flavor. So very excited for you to kind of give us feedback on what you're tasting in your cheeses out there. And if you could go to the next slide, Rebecca, as we're tasting Camembert, just to go back to a little bit more of the backstory of its origins, you know, how they relate to the importance of caves. It's really this idea of a lot of different themes, but especially humidity. To tell the legend of Camembert, it's said to have been invented by a Norman farmer named Marie Harel during the French Revolution. So there's not a lot of historical record. However, it's kind of a popular creation myth that we as cheesemongers love to share with our customers. There was a priest who passed through Marie's tiny village of Camembert in 1791, fleeing for his life from Paris. He had previously grown up on a farm in Ile-de-France, so that's the area where Brie is said to have been originated in the 7th century. Supposedly, this is again all, you know, kind of legend, but anyway, as a priest and as we understand those monastic cheese making and winemaking and even beer making traditions, he understood how traditional brie was made. Marie sheltered him, and as a thank you, he offered these cheese making techniques that he used in his former parish that she was able to adapt to her local cheese making methods to create Camembert. So she was kind of hybridizing this brie recipe and turning it into something completely different and regional to the area of Camembert. What's most generally agreed upon for this type of cheese is that and Marie Harel specifically, is that she can be credited to kind of refining these methods of this cheese, also establishing a really savvy kind of cheese making family, a growing family business. They were able to sell their cheese in larger cities, and they really helped early on define that brand that is Camembert today. Again, to go back to this idea of the cave, one of the methods that's important to talk about in this sense is the geological landscape around Normandy. So Brie, the Ile-de-France region, many limestone plains, and in Normandy, I think you see, yes, of course, water-formed limestone caves present in the area, as well as karst. The western part of Normandy, it's covered by the Armorican Massif, but most of the region lies in the Paris Basin. And cellars, of course, were hugely important to the preservation of this style of cheese. So prior to refrigeration, caves and cellars built into the bedrock really helped maintain humidity, preserve the delicate rind of this cheese. Bloomies, they really like to mature in cool temperatures, really high in relative humidity, like 92%. And it's likely that the Harel estate had a type of cave in their area there that they were holding their cheeses that was conducive to aging these Camembert style cheeses. So prior to refrigeration, caves like this were able to provide something very close to refrigeration to help these cheeses ripen to perfection. And that's it for me for the first cheese. So thank you so much.
So I think
All right. Yes, it is William's turn to talk about the wine.
sounds good. So So I will jump directly to the tasting part, but let me tell you two things about the Chardonnay. It's one of my my favorite wine, and it's the Chardonnay is a green skin grape and is used worldwide everywhere, like from New Zealand, France. It was originally from France, but it's like in US, very popular now. And but it's also like a Chardonnay is a component of a lot of different wines, right? So especially sparkling wines. If you think like Champagne or Franciacorta in Italy, it's all made by Chardonnay grapes, it's mostly. So so now you can pour some of your wine. So I think people just really I will drink some of it, but it's just to do like the right show now. So first of all, like make a little swirl of the wine in your glass, just to create this opening and getting more hair for the wine. And the next stuff you want to do, it's just kind of nose the wine, smell, and try, and what do you think. And the reason why we give some air is because we activate some flavors to come to the top of this wine, and so we can smell that the wine is what kind of flavor we can recognize in this wine. So then you can take a sip and try to pick different flavors that you can recognize in this wine. So, and right now I just want you to pick the wine, and then later, a little bit like in 1 minute, I will tell you the difference between the hooked and the unhooked Chardonnay. Why I think it's good to try unhooked Chardonnay sometimes in our life, because it's like the hooked one is super popular, but I think the wine is a little bit changed by the barrel, right? So take a sip and try to flow your wine around your tongue and try to understand what you recognize. I think the winemakers have a choice when they do. I don't want to say now the tasting. You can tell me later in the Menti pool what you taste here. Of course, those wine has like a citrusy, some rose, thyme, dill, some cloves. So but then the big portion of this wine is the winemakers have a choice just after the fermentation with these grapes, and then the grape turn sugar into wine, right? And so the yeast is just turning this sugar into wine, and then aging the wine, it's another part of the process. So you can bottle the wine right away, and it's going to be capturing how this the main taste of the wine, or maybe you can age the wine in oak barrel. So the oak plank can, when they ship the barrel, they have to heat the oak. And because the oak can become pliable, and you can put the wine in the barrel with toasted oak, and so the wine start to take a flavor of toast, right? For example, where the white wine in the oak barrel tastes like vanilla, cinnamon. They have this really round flavor. So, for example, like Chardonnay, this normal Chardonnay from Napa has this clove, cinnamon, vanilla, but and the color is golden, poorly golden. So it's so that the oxygen permeate the oak and get inside the wine, and also taking like this taste of apple cut, like when you cut the apple in the on the table, right? So, but an oaked wine is different. It's more like lighter body than the oaked counterpart, and with more fresh fruit flavors like this one. I can feel like fresh vanilla, like cedary or citrusy in this wine, and the body of the wine is super light, right? Because it's I'm drinking like a Chardonnay, an oak Chardonnay from France, and it's not only the alcohol giving body, but it's it's a part of the game, right? So it's like a 13% alcohol. It's not like very high, but it's a good white one. So, and again, like the body of the wine generally comes from the alcohol. so you can feel the difference between the different percentage of the alcohol. So the alcohol give the body, but also you can also like feel the barrel, the oak inside or the tannins, like they give like some also the body of this wine. But this is very light, and it's it's citrusy, fresh, and I think coupled very well with this cheese is already be fat, greasy. So I think I would say like I will leave like to Kathleen maybe a comments on the cheese for sure. But I tried that cheese, and now I'm drinking this wine. It's very well like coupled. So I think so I know I saw the people is already going on the Menti pool, and I'm curious to see some of the words. I don't know if I saw that sharing, but I was talking, so I didn't.
We can reshare briefly, but we really have to keep moving on too.
Okay, so I know the Chardonnay. I wasn't going too long. I knew that. So
William likes to talk about Chardonnays.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. I'm sorry. I would be faster.
It's okay. Stefano is sharing it again, and so we'll take a really brief look.
Yeah, it's perfect. Like fruity, citrus, perfect. Yeah, okay, that's it. I will pass you, Chris, again.
All right, let me share my screen again. There we go. All
Awesome.
right, now it's on to Chris, who's going to give us a little bit of geology background. Thank you very much, William and Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you guys. So this is the karst cave I mentioned earlier in the little Caucasus. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a map. You can see Iran in the south, Azerbaijan to the east, and the nation of Georgia to the north. So Armenia is right there in the middle, and that's where this cave is located. And there's a huge paper that National Geographic helped fund, and the research was done by several professors. So you can see top left, that's the entrance to the cave. Then you can see inside how the archaeologists did the grid on the center picture and the right picture, and you can see all the artifacts, and radiocarbon helped date these to the Copper Age. And similar artifacts have also been found in Egypt, in tombs of some of the kings and the pharaohs, and also in Israel's West Bank. And then William's going to talk a little bit later about some really old things that have been found in Italy. So even before we were making like man-made caves, like human-made caves, people were accessing naturally made caves. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to tell you how these caves are made. And if you were ever forced to take carbonate geology when you were an undergrad, you already know all about karst. On the upper right corner, you'll see the whole system. So you have to have some kind of limestone, and you have to have some kind of moving water. The magic of dissolution, right? So there's a red arrow pointing to where it says cave mouth. So that's analogous to this cave that is in Armenia. And soluble carbonate, which is like limestone, marble, and gypsum, is dissolved by water. Water is generally acidic, which means that has a pH of below 7. And it's not going to hurt you. It's just how water is. Water interacts chemically with the rocks. It enlarges fissures or like any kind of tiny cracks that are already there, and it flows through. It dissolves the rock material as it flows through. That's how you actually get hard water sometimes, when you get calcium in your water and it like makes your shower glass all white and is super annoying. It's because you generally might have carbonate in it. Enlargement of the cracks eventually, of course, results in huge open spaces, just like caves, like the one you saw on the previous page, and eventually it can lead to sinkholes and other collapse features like we hear about in Florida. Kathleen's going to talk a little bit more about this. It's amazing because all these regions that are really famous that you associate with wine and cheese are areas that are on limestone. Limestone is such an important part of like cave formation and the history of wine and cheese. It's so cool how it's also integrated. So you want to think of karst as like the Swiss cheese of rocks. It's got some holes in it. Lots of holes of various sizes, and some of these holes are good for storing wine and cheese. You can see on the bottom right, that's a Google aerial photo of the cave in Armenia, and it's still near moving water in modern time. So, and you can go visit it. It's a tourist attraction. It's open now to the public. So do we think that the cave is getting larger below the surface since there's still moving water in the area? Probably, right? Okay, next slide. All right, so this is for you to type into the chat box. Think about what economic geology activity would create a brilliant wine storage cave. So what's something that we already do as geologists that would give us really nice space to store wine and cheese. Nailed it. First person to answer, mining. That is right. Okay, next, Rebecca. I'm trying to go fast so we don't get behind. There you go.
Sorry, for some
Okay.
reason I can't advance the slides a lot, but that was your last slide, right? Thank you.
Yeah, that was it. Mhm.
Thank you.
We'll talk
All right,
more about
Kat,
mining later.
thank you. We all love talking about mining. Kat is going to ask a question to the panelists from the audience. Go ahead, Kat.
All right, so we have 3 great questions here, and I'm having a really hard time picking one, but I'm going to go with the top one, the first one that was asked, because it's a quick one, I think. How long are Camembert cheeses ripened? So what's the average like aging process or timeline for that?
It really depends if it's an imported cheese versus one that's made in the States. So Hudson Valley Camembert is around 4 to 5 weeks of age.
Okay.
If we were to eat Camembert imported from France, you have to factor in the supply chain and the time that it spends, oftentimes on a boat getting over to us. So oftentimes green, very young wheels will be placed on shipping containers, and they actually ripen in transit. So by the time they get to us, they're a little bit older, but they still should, or sometimes they might get here really quickly and feel very firm. But a good indicator of a ripe cheese is when it's giving even softer than like the thickest part of your kind of thumb muscle. If it feels really, really squishy, or if it's running towards like runny or goopy, that's a good indication that the cheese is like past 5 weeks.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And maybe I'll get you guys to peek at the Q&A and we can answer them just in the Q&A for those who missed it. So I'll pass you back to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Kat. We will have time for more questions. We just want to make sure we get through all of our tastings before the end of our program, but I think we'll have more time later. So with that, we're going to have our first palate cleanser. At this point, please try your best to stop eating the Camembert and drinking the unoaked Chardonnay. Eat some crackers, or if you're like me and you forgot crackers, literally just like a loaf of bread, and drink some water. And while you do that, we are going to have Kathleen tell us a bit about what is cheese anyway.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I think water and even just basic baguette or bread is totally fine. Great way to kind of refresh your palate and give it a break before you move on to the next pairing. But we're just taking an opportunity to discuss what cheese is. We get this question all the time at Murray's. There's a lot of definitions depending on who you are. Defined at Murray's though, we call it the controlled spoilage of milk, with the goal to preserve its nutritional value. So the result of this controlled spoilage, aka the cheese making process, and noting here that there's many recipes, both modern, hybrid, and traditional when it comes to different cheeses, is that cheese is essentially a solid emulsion. It's a fermented food. It's also somewhat high in fat. And of all the cheeses that you have in front of you and the hundreds that you've probably encountered in your lifetime or have observed at your local cheese counter, it's so easy to feel intimidated or kind of hesitant on selecting or even going there because it can be overwhelming. But you should take comfort in the fact that no matter the style or the recipe, cheese is generally made from the same 4 ingredients. So I have a question here. You can head over to menti.com to engage in this polling question. Can you name the 4 primary ingredients of cheese? I'm looking forward to seeing your responses of what those ingredients are that make up the cheese. Yes, I see people entering in the chat as well. And Stefano, I think you're going to share. Yeah, milk, of course. It's also an emulsion. It's a collection of milk fat globules, mostly saturated. It's held in an aqueous environment, so basically whey. And that's also another kind of addition or component of milk, the whey, that consists of lactose, more protein. There's also protein throughout the cheese, as well as minerals and certain vitamins. You can kind of reference that water content graphic on the left, or when we get back to the slide, but I'm seeing a lot of people are putting bacteria, rennet, enzymes. Yeah, I figured you all would nail it on the head just being on this, being a panelist as part of this experience. I wanted to see what many of you were gonna answer. And when you talk about whey and kind of acid and those types of things, the acid, you know, in some cases, yes, it'll be added to cheeses, primarily fresh cheeses like mozzarella, ricotta. But the 4 that I'm speaking about today are contained in the 4 cheeses that we're tasting tonight specifically. So we talked about milk. You can see here, milk is primarily made of water. The rest, there are some solids, which we'll look at. But there's 4 main milk types that you can see cheeses made from in the United States and in most countries. Cow, sheep, and goat are the big 3. And then also you see water buffalo as well. In that photo, if Stefano, if you could go back to the slide, there's a very kind of close-up photo of what milk looks like under high magnification. So you can see in the bottom left there, suspension of milk fat globules. Those are those orange circles. That's what they look like under an electron microscope. So those are kind of suspended among the protein and other components. The primary protein found in cheese is called casein. And then I also saw a lot of you in the Menti poll entered bacteria. Cultures is the industry terminology from a cheese perspective of how we reference bacteria. We also call them microbes. They include molds and also yeast. There's many thousands that could be potentially found on cheese. Oftentimes they're added intentionally by the cheesemaker, by the affineur, to develop the cheese. And sometimes in the case of farmstead cheeses, where the entire process from, you know, dairying to cheese aging is handled on the same property by the same people, those microbes kind of enter on the business end of that. So what does that mean? They're basically those ambient microbes that are found in the barn, on the farmer's hands, on the animal themselves, getting into the milk, and they contribute largely to flavors. So milk, you know, basic ingredient, can't have cheese without it. Cultures largely responsible for the transformation of cheese and that resulting flavor. Also, I think that's a really important one for the purposes of this lecture particularly, is that idea of cultures. The other 2 ingredients are rennet. So rennet is an enzyme. I saw a lot of you entered enzyme as one of your thoughts of what the primary ingredients are, and you're generally correct. These enzymes can be animal or plant derived or even vegetarian friendly microbial lab-made enzymes, which is pretty cool. If you consider rennet, consider it as a coagulant, so something that's really allowing those milk solids to clot. So you can see in the slide what is primarily made up of those milk solids. You know, I mentioned protein and fat, some minerals that are measured as ash, some vitamins even. And then of course, there's definitely some other things going on in there. But anyway, going back to rennet, it kind of alters the milk, the way its composition. So it changes that protein, that casein, and it encourages it to coagulate. They kind of join together. Those solids thicken together. All of the liquids are kind of dispersing off that way. It gets repurposed in another way oftentimes. And then that 4th ingredient, I did see some people guessed salt. That is correct. We think of salt so much as like a seasoning, but also in the case of cheese making, or remember, controlling the spoilage of milk, it's limiting the growth of potentially harmful bacteria, like pathogens, as we call them. It's regulating that microbial growth in the cheese. It's drawing out moisture. It's helping the rind, the crust of the cheese form, which we'll look at in our next cheese, Gruyere. It, of course, enhances flavor as a seasoning. And there's all different methods of salting and cheese making. It's not just like a cut and dry sprinkle salt. There's a lot of different ways. So I hope you feel more confident on what cheese is.
Since you said Gruyere, and we're running a bit behind, I figured we'd go ahead and switch to the Gruyere.
Yes, thank you.
Not giving you a chance to breathe. You got to keep going, Kathleen.
That's totally fine. Just remember using your senses when you're evaluating the cheese. So I have, you know, my all-purpose knife here that I'm using in my day-to-day, and I have kind of like what looks like a chocolate bar of Gruyere. So we're tasting Murray's cave-aged Gruyere, or another Gruyere Alpine-style cheese if you have it. If you don't have the Murray's cave-aged Gruyere, that's totally fine. I cut myself a little bar off of that, and then beyond that, I cut it even further in half. I'm just going to actually use my rind end as like a little handle as I'm smelling this cheese. You know, you can cut it thick, you can cut it thin. The thing that's great about Gruyere is that it's so highly desired on the day-to-day that you kind of want it on everything, and your eggs on your salads. You can cook with it, of course. Enjoying it just by itself with wine is really pleasurable as well. But if you kind of break that piece in half and take a nice whiff of it, you should be getting some kind of brothy, yeasty. I'm so excited to hear what everyone else is tasting on this. Toasted flavors and aromas. You might be getting a little crunchy texture as you're biting into the cheese. As you're biting it, and you know, the retronasal olfaction is, you know, that process is happening. You might be getting some notes of like forage and barnyard, and like some little bits of like nuttiness, almond I get in this cheese as well. Just remember with Gruyere, this is like a high elevation cheese. It's coming from Switzerland. The cows are oftentimes in high season are pastured in the mountains. So forage is really fundamental to the quality of milk that's used to make this resulting cheese. We'll discuss aging, you know, and how this cheese is, how it develops. You know, you see that note about bunkers. It's like, what? Large wheels like Gruyere, which are similar size to Parmigiano-Reggiano, about 40 kilos. They demand a lot of space, and the demand for this cheese is up. I can tell you, in our country, we've bought all the Gruyere that we could possibly get our hands on for the season. French and Swiss cheese companies, actually, the producers that make Comté, Gruyere, they've actually, in some cases, acquired old mountain military bunkers from governments and repurposed them to age their cheeses. They need that space. Bunkers basically are great because they're located kind of ours in particular by a riverbed. Those springs are providing some humidity into the bunker. Basically, they kind of retrofitted it to accommodate cheese aging. And they're just letting the climate do most of the work there. So if you can go to the next slide, Rebecca, we can kind of talk a little bit more about what this cave is like where Gruyere is aged. Gruyere, again, it's a name protected cheese. I mentioned it was coming from Switzerland. This is our private label Gruyere. It's aged about 12 months, made with rockhouse milk and animal rennet. We purchase more than half of the annual production of this particular cheesemakers every year to sell this cheese in our cheese shops across the country. But any we classify Gruyere in the Alpine style family. So you call it the Swiss and nutty family, the melting family, mountain cheeses. There's a lot of different ways to categorize this type of cheese. But a lot of cheeses like Emmentaler, Fontina, farmstead artisan types, Jarlsberg, they all kind of fall into that category. While these types can be aged in natural and man-made caves, ours in particular goes through a very specific aging facility for their affinage found outside of the area of Gruyere, but into the surrounding landscape, right? So the facility is built into the land. It has sandstone walls. There's naturally present water, as I mentioned. It basically pools on the floor in low kind of levels, but that infiltration into the environment really encourages some great microbial activity, which is what the oveners want to see on the surface of this cheese. So they put special wall and ceiling covers around to help water from dripping onto the cheese itself. But the affinage process, you know, it's very early days of brining and rubbing it in brine. But that temperature is what's really important for this cheese. So you want to maintain a really meticulously monitored temperature to keep the cheese from over fermenting is what will happen if it gets too warm. But these types of cheese like to be in somewhat of a warm environment, a higher temperature, because you want to encourage that aromatic diversity. You want to activate those enzymes to kind of do their thing and to really encourage some really exciting resulting aromas and flavors, of course, in the cheese. You want those proteins to break down in more diverse ways, you know, the milk as it's breaking down. But again, you run the risk of activating an unwanted defect, which can kind of cause bad microbes to grow in it. So it's like this fine line of balancing the temperature that you want to get after for aging and refining this cheese appropriately. But the results, you know, you get a classic cheese such as this, the expression of, you know, brothiness, that umami caramelized onion flavor should really help you enjoy this and appreciate this cheese even further, just knowing and appreciating the way, you know, the high level in which this cheese has been maintained and aged and also brought to us so we can enjoy it today. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Kathleen. William, can you lead us into the wine?
Sure, so it's time for the Pinot Noir. So
Yes.
I already poured some Pinot Noir because the red one even need more air to oxygenate. So the Pinot Noir is a red wine grape variety, of course, as you can see. So the name is derived from the French word of pine and black. So it's it's growing in the pines. No, it's just because the shape of the grapes is it's like a pine cone. So and this make this name, the variety just make the name of Pinot Gris or Pinot Noir. It's really the shape of the grapes. So and Pinot Noir grapes are grown around the world, and they like cooler climates, and the grapes are mainly associated with the Burgundy region in France originally, but then now you can find the Pinot Noir all around the world. They have the grapes have a thin skin, so they are really hard to grow, and sometimes they can be affected by mold and other parasites. So it's it's a good wine, but it's also hard to grow. And it is producing this light colored red wine. It's not a super red Cabernet or Zinfandel, and this is also a lower colored, a lower medium body. So with this, there are no tannins inside, because the skin is always giving tannins, right? So a Chianti Sangiovese is a really thick skin. This a thin skin is not making a lot of tannins, so it's not it's not making your tongue kind of be sour, this kind of taste. So and it's Pinot Noir lighter in style, more I would say more vibrant, more acidic, and compared to Cabernet Zinfandel. And this is one of the main reasons why it's very appreciated by many. I think it's a really popular wine. And when young, wines made from Pinot Noir tend to have a red berry fruit aroma. I don't know if we are already in the Menti pool. I will try to be short on this wine, even if I have a few comments on the cave side. And so when young, the wine made from Pinot Noir tend to be red berry fruit aroma, cherries, raspberries, strawberries, and when they mature, they change typical to aged wine, they taste like a mix of complex flavor, that's more strong flavor. Well, anyone is different. It's depending from how they produce, so they can get a taste of different notes.
I think a lot of people are jumping to the Menti pool and answering for the cheese alone, is my guess, when I see some of these answers, and someone said that before. So just remember, everybody, try to answer the Menti poll for what you taste when you eat them and drink them together.
Yeah. So do you have time to say something about the caves and and the wines?
I'll give you time, William.
Okay, no, I would be really. So generally, I remember I found in this book as a sommelier 5 main rules for wines to age and to preserve the wines. So and then make it feeling if you listen those 5 rules and tell me what's the best environment or best system to age the wine. So constant temperature, so about 10 to 12 Celsius, I don't know, in Fahrenheit. But while wines for white wines 12, 15 for red wines. Be sure there is some humidity inside, so rules number 2, humidity. So temperature, humidity, no lights, and you need a horizontal position for the bottle, because you have to, especially with the cork, you need to make sure that the cork is always hydrated, so it's not the drying, because if it's drying, then you have the air going inside the bottle, and the air is changing the flavor of the wine. And then make also the air flowing in those environments, because you don't want to get a taste. Everything goes inside the cork and inside the wine. So caves, that's perfect. This constant temperature, humidity, no lights, and the other part is more how to position your barrel or your bottle. But it's essentially caves are a natural environment for that. And that's it. I thought it was brief on this one, so it's
Thank you so much, William. We love
Welcome.
hearing you talk. All right, we're going to move on to Chris to give us a
And both-
bit more geology background.
Thank you. Both of those Pinot Noir choices were really good. I drank both of them. They were excellent. Both of them. They're a little different, but you guys already answered the previous question. So you know mining is like hugely important economically, but in more ways than one. Once you take the stuff that's there out, you can put more things in, like wine and cheese. So around 50 BC, the Romans, who, you know, conquered so much of the world, they started mining salt and chalk in Reims in France, which today is known for its champagne production. Prior to the advent of artificial refrigeration, winemakers were storing champagne in these old Roman mines. So for a long time, these mines were used once the Roman Empire was done with them. So this is a key point. So abandoned mines played a huge role in the preservation of wine in France when it was at the forefront of their wine revolution and later in their political revolution. And we're going to talk more about French politics and how it impacted wine storage, which is really interesting. So fun question for you to put in the chat. There's 3 grapes that are the primary components in Champagne, and this region on the map is generally the Champagne region of France. And 3 grapes that you think or that you know are the main Champagne grapes, because Champagne itself is not a grape. Champagne is the sparkling component that it is a result of the fermentation of these specific grapes. So yeah, you got it. Chardonnay is one, and Pinot Noir is one. And the other one is actually Pinot, or it's not Pinot Blanc. It's I think it's Meunier. I don't know how to say that properly. Let me copy it and paste it into the chat so that William can
Somebody
correct
said
me.
that.
Yeah.
Somebody,
Oh
Stephanie
yeah.
somebody said
There
it.
you go. Pinot Noir. There you go. Very nice, Stephanie. You're on it. So it all
Yeah.
ties in. So these regions that are so well known for growing Pinot Noir, like what you just drank, and growing Chardonnay, which you drank previously, like these regions in France, all they do is grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and make amazing champagne that they age in these caves in these old mines. It's pretty cool. The next slide is a review from the first talk. So it's just going to review why the carbonate here is so important in France. There you go. Okay, so you can see on the upper left, this is when the French chalky limestones of the Champagne region were deposited. So you can see about, you know, Jurassic time. You can see the star is about this area of France. You can see it was shallow marine. So imagine like the Bahamas. So France during this time was like the Bahamas. You have this nice carbonate production, really nice, awesome. So this is why the region is like so good for growing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And that's why there's so many caves. And that's why the Romans went there to mine limestone and to mine salt, because this paleo environment was just perfect for it. All right, so next slide.
Thank you, Chris. For the purposes of time, we're going to skip checking on some Q&A at this time. Sorry, Kat, thank you. But I swear we will get to more Q&A. Let's move forward a bit. Time to cleanse your palates. I'm sorry if it feels like we're speeding through these, but there's just so many cheeses and wines to appreciate. We've got to get to them all. Now, back to the Menti poll. At this point, everybody should have worked through those initial couple questions. If you have yet to sign into the Menti poll, please do so now and answer those first couple questions, because we really want to get to know you all. We don't like that we can't have everybody's cameras on and everybody talking. So this is sort of our way to hear from you. So Stefano, I think, is going to share his screen in a second, once he is able to. And while this is occurring, everybody please remember to cleanse your palates. Again, if you're like me, your regular store-bought bread, go ahead and use that. Use some water. And here we go. Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. And you can also unmute yourself and walk us through them if you'd like. You're still muted, just so you know, Stefano.
All right, there we go. Thanks everybody for joining. I see all kinds of people from all over the world. I saw an Angola on here earlier. That may be the farthest, at least from me in Houston. A lot of people in Texas, Maryland, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Canada. Yeah, I don't think that's, it might be cat. It's exciting. Okay, keep them coming. We got, I think, 190 attendees and 134 that have filled this in. So if you haven't, go ahead and do that. And then let's go to the next slide, which is some feelings on what feelings caves inspire in you. I like bats, dark, kind of the biggest ones. I like the stalagmites and stalactites. Peace, spooky stories, spelunking, cheese. That's good. Somebody was thinking ahead for this. Secondary processes, obviously a geologist in the crowd. And then-
Also, Chris, I know Chris is the one that was really inspired to ask these questions. So I see you've turned
Yeah,
your
please
camera off. I don't
speak
know
up.
if you're still there, but Chris, please feel free to comment on these answers. So maybe you're taking a bio break at this moment. All right, go ahead, Stefan.
All right, no, you're fine. All right. And then regions associated with wine. So we've got a couple big ones in Italy, France, California, different parts of specifically in France and specifically in Italy and California. Strong US showing too. We got Oregon, Sonoma, Texas, Australia, and Germany, Pineywood's Vineyard. There we go. Got some
Oh man,
representation.
you get a free bottle of wine, whoever said
That's
that.
right. All right. And then last but not least, associated things with regions associated with cheese. So against Italy and France are back on here. Switzerland, their neighbor, has joined. Wisconsin, of course, in the US, followed closely, I think, by Vermont and Oregon, New York. And there was an interesting one I saw earlier. Keep moving on me, but oh, this one was funny. My refrigerator. It's good.
That must be Rebecca.
And then somebody in Brazil as well, Teresópolis.
Oh, nice.
So
Massive.
pretty
This
cool.
is great. Oh, Vermont. Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many cool places for wine and cheese, but you'll notice that a lot of the names overlapped, and that's for a good reason.
Yeah, I guess you have to decide which direction is the causality there, Chris. Is it wine because of cheese, or cheese because of wine, or caves because of both?
I think cave. Yeah, the cave. I think it's
Yeah.
the cave. The limestone.
Probably cave.
You gotta hail the limestone.
All right, was
Great.
that the end?
Yeah, that's the end of the first one. So
Okay, then I will share my screen again. And thank you so much. Hopefully everybody's palate is cleansed. We are now halfway through our tastings, and it is time for tasting number 3. Kathleen, you ready to take it away?
Yes, I was like seeing all these questions in the side chat, the Q&A, and I was trying to catch up there. Okay, so we are moving on to our third cheese. It is Murray's Reserve Cave Aged Annalise. So very similar appearance and texture to the Gruyere that we were tasting previous. It's okay if you don't have the Annalise, if you have another kind of unique Alpine style cheese, as I was describing them, that's similar to Gruyere. This is a perfectly fine one to discuss in this segment as well. You would approach it the same way you would Gruyere. It is created and aged and maintained in a very similar way, just smaller format wheel than Gruyere, much smaller. This is a cave aged original, so it's coming out of our own personal caves at Murray's Cheese in Long Island City, New York. However, the actual young, the green wheels, as I call them, we call them in the industry, came all the way from northern Switzerland, from Toggenburg. A very famous cheesemaker in our industry. He makes this cheese exclusively in his very, very tiny village. It's 700 meters above sea level. He's able to send us a few young wheels to age in our own alpine caves. It's made of brown Swiss cow's milk, primarily 13 local herds in Tufertswil is his village, are contributing to make this cheese. It started in 2003. He's previously a master cheesemaker of the name protected cheese known as Appenzeller. Now he's kind of gone off rogue and made his own very unique cheese, bucking tradition, not following what what his previous work was taking him to do. He's making his very own cultures to make this cheese. He's making his very own rennet. So it's highly unusual and highly respected, the work that he's doing to make this cheese. But when you're tasting it, so I'm just gonna actually nose my piece of Annalise just on the edge here, a nice cheesemonger size piece. You should really be getting a lot of aromas of dried grass, even cinnamon, cashews. A lot of really unique aromas are coming off of this cheese. In aging of all cheese, it's really important to remember, as we've been discussing caves, that air exchange is a huge element to affinage. So consider it like the third in the holy trinity of affinage that includes also temperature and humidity, and I guess no light. So there's the fourth one there. But if you go to the next slide, we can break down air exchange and Annalise a little bit further. It's really crucial to ensure this balance of oxygen to ammonia. So ammonia is a natural byproduct of affinage. Proteins are breaking down, so proteolysis is happening. As that's happening, amino acids are being released, and those kind of produce ammonia. So you can see that graphic at the bottom of the slide there. Although ammonia, we know it to be such an unpleasant smell, it's really important to be present in cheese making. It helps slow down the aging of a cheese in a good way, because it helps kind of stabilize it as it's kind of acclimating to the environment. So it's kind of seen as a regulator. It's helping even out the aging process. But the one caveat to ammonia is that it's constantly being produced. So without that oxygen transfer, you can actually kill the beneficial microbes that are colonizing on the rinds of this cheese, Annalise in particular, and like Gruyere, for example. And the aging will stop completely. So you don't really want that to happen. But, ammonia, aside from that, it's also stimulating yeast growth as well. And that's somewhat undesirable in affinage as well. So the graphic below is kind of indicating, again, the process of that. But if you look at this picture on the right here, this is a great example of what's happening with Annalise, or excuse me, on the left, the rendering, not the photo. You can see a great example of air exchange. This is just kind of a image of the limestone caves where Roquefort cheese is only produced in Roquefort-sur-Soulzone in France. So it's kind of near the Rhone, the Camembert Plateau, southern France. You can see those natural vents. I don't know the French term for it. Josh and I kept seeing the term fleurine come up. We couldn't find an accurate English translation to the word, but we took that to mean, the cracks in the cave itself to kind of allow for that air circulation to happen inside the cave, moderating that ammonia that's being produced. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see our cave-aged Annalise aging in what we call our alpine cave. We have 4 caves at Murray's, but when you enter the cave, all you can smell is ammonia. So even with that air exchange, you can't really smell it in the picture. We don't have smell-o-vision, but trust me, it's there. When there's not enough Annalise, actually, though, to keep that going, we might move another cheese into the room to kind of keep up with it. So I hope you're enjoying your Annalise. I hope you're getting quite different expression of aroma and flavor as opposed to the Gruyere. The texture should be pretty on par, but it's coming from a very different region in Switzerland, and should have very different flavor.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I do taste a difference and smell a difference. Tiffany, we haven't heard from you in a while, but we're so excited to hear from you.
Yay, hello. This has been so good so far. Oh my gosh, the cheese is wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna be drinking cava with the Annalise. And so how to drink this wine. First of all, this one should be very well chilled, like 39 to 43 degrees Fahrenheit. The only thing, I've been seeing some comments in the tech chat box, and yes, the only thing that cava has in common with champagne is that it has CO2 in it, which you guys can probably see in your glass here. If you're not experiencing the glass out of your event glass, which is an ideal glass, The other ideal glass would be the slim tulip shape that turns toward the rim, because sometimes the alcohol component with the CO2 dissolving can be a little much in your traditional way of tasting wine, where you're, swirling and smelling. It can become a little overpowering. So that's why we do drink out of that tulip shape that turns inward. So this cava and most cava is, and I'm drinking the Barosca cava that we suggested in the notes, but it's produced using the traditional method. So in that sense, if a sparkling wine is produced in a traditional method, there is a possibility that it could be aged in caves. I couldn't find anywhere that this particular one was aged in cave, but it does come from Catalonia. So I feel like perhaps that's an area that is, conducive to cave development, perhaps, but we'll have to check with our geologists on that. But the traditional method is where you make a still wine and you oak age it in barrels, and then you bottle the wine. You do your primary fermentation to get your still wine, age it in oak, and then you put the wine in bottles, and that's where the secondary fermentation happens to produce just a slight bit more alcohol and also this extra the CO2 that you enjoy. So that this could be done in a cave-like setting. So that this cava particularly sat in a bottle doing what's called a riddling for 9 months. And that's basically just someone going in. We had some pictures of a cave with some champagne aging. That's those little riddling racks. And you just basically go through and like turn them ever like a quarter of the way ever so often. And it's basically letting that secondary fermentation finish. And then as the yeast die off, then that slurry of yeast like falls down towards the head of the bottle, and you take out that slurry later with a clarifying agent. And the cava is actually named after caves or stone cellars, so it is likely that a lot of the cavas that you do enjoy actually are aged in caves. They're just not using it as a marketing technique, perhaps. But I think that the cava is great as an aperitif, mostly because the carbonic acid refreshes and sensitizes the papillae on the tongue and gets you really ready for like enjoying a rich meal. But it also accompanies appetizers really well, and of course fine cheeses, which I'm sure you're experiencing right now. But also just cava in general, like general psychological dimension when you're opening a bottle of sparkling wine just brings about enjoyment, and so you really don't need anything to enjoy it with, but definitely I've been enjoying it with these cheeses. The grapes, I can't pronounce them, but they are 3 Spanish grape varieties. I'm happy to type them in the chat box, but I think that I would embarrass myself if I tried to pronounce them for you. And you might taste a little bit of ripe apple, some pear, citrus. This one has soft bubbles.
Shall we bring up the Menti poll? We haven't.
Oh, please. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Since we're talking about what you're tasting, I feel like we should bring that up.
Thank you.
Sorry, we like to keep Stefano on his toes here. He does so much in the background.
And now for Stefano, yeah. So I was going to say that riddling effect that I described earlier, where they're this like up. I saw also in the notes, the chat box, that someone mentioned the Sharmot method. So the Sharmot method is where the secondary fermentation happens in tank. And so when you use the Sharmot method, you're not really, you probably aren't going to be aging your wine in a cave. But the thing about aging it in the traditional method in barrel, which could happen in a cave, you emphasize some more nutty flavors that come about because of that secondary fermentation from the yeast interacting with the oak. So yeah, let's see what you guys, some nutty, earthy, pear, a hangover. Someone must have had a bad experience on cava or some kind of sparkling wine before. Honey, bubbles, it's sweet, serendipitous. So someone might want to go write a poem after drinking this. So some memories. So going back to that psychological
wonderful.
dimension that kava or other wines of bubbles bring you to.
I think these answers are getting more and more enjoyable as we work through the wine.
Yes, cheers.
Thank you. All right, Chris, are you ready to give us a little bit of our geology?
I'm eating cheese. Call back later. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Next, we're just going to look at an example of a mine that the Romans made. This was a Roman chalk mine in France, Gallo-Roman. Gallo is from Gaul, and it is the old Latin Roman word for the nation of France. Before France was called France, it was called Gaul, G-A-U-L. And this mine dates back to the 300s AD. It's about 60 feet below ground, and it's in Reims, which is that same area in northeast France that we talked about already, famous for champagne. And you can see how much storage there is of champagne there. If you can read the sign in the picture on the right, the color photograph, you can see it actually says champagne. And it's just, it blows my mind to see how they're just stacked in there, just aging beautifully, collecting dust. This is the only thing I like to have in my house that's dusty, champagne. Okay, the next two slides are some fun pictures. Yeah, so these are great actual vacation destinations if you guys are ready to travel, maybe next year. The next slide is Tufa cellar. So this is in Italy, another region that we strongly associate with good wine and good cheese. These ancient wine cellars are carved out of the soft tufa or tough limestone rock in the area. That part of Italy is very famous for, and William can probably talk about it a little bit more, and maybe Stefano, because they're both from Italy. The cellar pictured is now owned by the Cantine del Natai winery. Is that right, William? Stefano? But they're a huge producer. They're one of the most important wine producers in southern Italy.
Am I supposed to move on now? Sorry.
You can, unless Stefano wants to correct me on my pronunciation.
Oh.
Horrid.
Stefano
All
or
good,
William?
all good.
All right, so this is a really fun one. This is in Hungary. And these wine cellars are actually carved into the hill. So this is very similar to the picture that Tiffany showed us at the beginning. It's a wine cellar that's carved in. And this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So you can definitely go tour this. So I know this is all well and good, but you're like, okay, so these are wonderful suggestions, but what if I like spooky wine? What if I'm a really scary person and I want spooky wine? Well, I have just the place for you on the next slide. Okay, so aging like a fine dead body or a wine or a cheese. So the catacombs are a big deal in Europe, right? They're in Italy, they're in France, they're famous, they're all over the place. They're in multiple countries. The catacombs were discovered to be fantastic aging and preservation spaces accidentally. So in ancient Rome, people actually ran out of space to store their wine in their houses, and they started storing it in tombs. And they discovered that the wine actually got better when they stored it in the tombs. So it was an accidental discovery. It was an epiphany by accident. Then medieval monks followed this trend. They stored wine underneath their abbeys and underneath their monasteries across Europe. Of course, like the Catholic Church, huge into wine. It's really important for mass. So they made a lot of wine. But it was also less likely to get stolen if it was surrounded by dead people under a monastery, because people are, very paranoid about stealing from the dead. And then most recently in 2017, there was a wine heist orchestrated by thieves who drilled through the walls in the catacombs, which some parts are open to tourists, in Paris, and they stole, what did they say? Let's see. It was like $1.4 million worth of wine that got stolen. It was insane. It was a private collector's wine that was buried underground adjacent to a catacomb. And so all they had to do was like
Am I the only one that lost Chris, or has everybody lost Chris?
There's a dramatic pause, definitely.
Okay.
Oh, she's back.
Oh no,
She's
am I back? Am I
Chris,
back?
yeah.
They
okay.
drilled and then you stopped.
Oh, they drilled through the limestone in the catacomb and they made out with like $1.5 million worth of wine. It's so crazy. So the catacombs were adapted from old limestone quarries again. And during the 1700s, what happened in the 1700s? The French Revolution. So
I was going to say America.
that too. So that was important also. So the French Revolution, and because of all the fights, all the battling, the cemeteries overflowed. So what did they do? They dug up the dead bodies that were bones now, and they put them in the quarries. And that's how the catacombs got filled with bones. And that's why they look so organized, because they dug up all the dead bodies because they ran out of space for bodies during the revolution. Okay.
That's super creepy and amazing. And thank you so much, Chris. So we are going to keep trucking along. We do have some time deadlines that we're coming close to, but I think it looks like we might have time for one question from the audience. Sorry, I just threw that at you, Kat, while you're chewing your cheese and drinking your wine. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But we're really working on the fly in the background here, just so
no, for sure. For sure. We've got we've got our expert panelists answering most questions as they come in, which is like awesome. But I see there's like 3 coming up that are asked by LC, this mysterious LC character. And they ask about what's so special about limestone. Does it breathe better? And are our most famous caves limestone? So I don't know, Chris, did you want to take that, or another folk on the line want to comment on that?
We have a ton of geologists on the call, but I'll take a stab. The limestone is just the most ready to form a cave. So it's the easiest to erode. There's much fewer caves made of sandstone. Limestone is just it's the easiest thing to make a cave out of because it's so readily dissolvable with something easy like water.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for the question, Elsie.
Oh, if I can add something here, I don't know, because just it really depends from the geomorphology. I think you need a rock with the same property, limestones, but also tufa. I grew up in a place that was a volcanic place. So there was I think the comparable geology rock to limestone is more sedimentary, is the tufa, because it's still volcanic and is still able to resist and create a cave. So this was just my 2 cents on this. Sorry.
No, that was right in line with what someone was saying in the chat. The tufa. All right, so we will answer all the questions. I know I keep saying that, and I promise we will, but I think we have enough time for a quick palate cleanser. And I like these reminders because if you're like me, you're just going to keep eating the cheese. I haven't stopped cutting this cheese since we started tasting it. So this is me telling you to pause, try to stop eating, eat your bread and cracker while I quickly tell you what's coming up next. So from the Women's Network, we have a couple events coming up, and I'm now realizing I never introduced myself at the beginning, but I am the technical program director of the Women's Network, which is why I'm the one here to tell you all of the other technical programming we have coming up. We have one more big technical event before the end of the year. It was focused on outreach for K through 16, Earth and Environmental Science Education, which is really just a fancy way of saying everybody who is learning. And we're really excited about this event. It's focused on Texas as art and how we can take Landsat imagery, turn it into art, and use it for educational purposes in an interactive way, such as scavenger hunts, to really get people excited about the earth sciences. So we're really excited for this event. Please check it out. If you're a little more interested in our Geology of series, which is the series you're currently attending, our next event we are planning is, drumroll, the Geology of Coffee. We have had so many requests to do the Geology of Coffee. So that is what we are going to do next. And we are planning that for winter or spring of 2022. We are also starting a new series called Short Courses. So I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who really want to attend short courses, but you're like, I definitely don't have time to go to a whole short course, nor do I have the money. Well, we've got the answer for you. These will be free and they will be very short, an hour and a half to 3 hours of your time. And our goal is for people to leave with tangible skills and new knowledge that you can apply in your job or studies. If you're interested in our past events, you can check out our YouTube channel, and please join. If somebody could drop in the chat how to join the Women's Network so that you can receive our emails, I really appreciate that, all of the people helping me out. And I'm going to pass this off to Dan, who's going to talk a bit about some of the things coming up at Midwest Geosciences.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I am Dan Kelleher. I'm a hydrogeologist with Midwest Geosciences Group. Hello to everybody, and a shout out to a lot of familiar names that I see coming up on the chat box. You know who you are. I'm glad everybody's here. You know that despite the educational element of this great webinar today, it doesn't qualify for CEUs, unfortunately, but Midwest Geosciences Group can help with that. I'm very excited because we finally finished the preparation for a totally new online certificate course. And in case you're not aware of this, the US EPA published in 2017 a document outlining something called environmental sequence stratigraphy. And despite its tremendous merit, there's some unspoken challenges that have plagued some professionals from implementing it. Midwest Geosciences Group is going to tackle those challenges by stepping through the strategies to help people implement environmental sequence stratigraphy. And as you might guess, it begins with deciphering depositional environments. Okay, and then translating that story of the sediments that are telling us on meaningful boring logs. And this training experience goes much further than that. Registration is open right now at midwestgeo.com. If you don't mind, Rebecca, can we go to the next slide, please? I also want to bring your attention to two unique items in case you do environmental or engineering related work. Midwest Geosciences Group created a very unique training kit called the Unified Soil Classification System Calibrated Baseline Soil Kit. Now it's 5 known samples of fat clay, lean clay, and silt, well-graded sand, and poorly graded sand. These are samples that are exquisite for learning soil classification for both the USCS and USDA textures and learning the differences between those two systems. They're very unique samples. And if you want to practice your calibrating your own soil classification skills, these are the samples to use. But new for 2022 is what I'm calling today for this event, the Unknown Sample Soil Kit. It's going to be released in about 2 weeks. It's going to be posted on our site in about 2 weeks. It's 10 soil samples where you don't know the classification or the texture, but the concept is you test yourself and then you log into our website to learn the answers and then also the key steps for classifying each sample. This collection will be posted on our site in about 2 weeks. It's a privilege to be here today, and thank you for letting me promote this stuff. We're here to help people because we're all in this big thing together to be responsible stewards of this precious earth we have. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Dan. I could not agree with you more. And with that, we're going to transition into our final tasting. And is Kathleen still here? Yes, Kathleen's still there. Okay, Kathleen, thank you so much for sticking around with us. Please take it away and tell us about Grayson.
Gosh, it's my pleasure. We're tasting the strongest cheese. In some ways, it might, for others, you might have found the Annalise to be the most pungent and robust of all 4 of the cheeses that we've tried, but we're finishing with the wildest cheese on our plate, Grayson from Meadow Creek Dairy. Just as a reminder, we're using all of our senses, so we're gonna go ahead and cut ourselves a nice piece of this cheese. So this is a cow's milk cheese, a raw cow's milk cheese, and it technically can be grouped in that bloomy rind family category, but that family kind of breaks apart into 2 groups, and one of which is that washed rind group of cheeses that tend to have a rind that is somewhat like terracotta tile colored. You might see some different colors and different molds growing on the surface of the cheese. I saw in the Q&A, someone said that the surface of their Grayson was very slimy, and that's actually something that you might see in washed rind cheeses. Sometimes the rinds can be a little wet and sticky, like Epoisse cheese, I think, is a great example of that. I would say you're welcome to take a little bite of the rind and see if it kind of does something for you and makes for a better taste experience. Otherwise, you can trim it off and you don't have to eat it if you don't want to, and just focus on that paste. So if you remember to kind of, when you're cutting, if you like the rind, to kind of be democratic about how you're dispersing your cuts and make sure that there's somewhat of an even amount of rind to paste ratio going on. I think that's the best way to divide up the cheese. But the paste, Grayson can be very deeply golden yellow in color. We're in a time of the year where the kind of seasons are changing, and the animals maybe they only make this cheese seasonally, but when you're getting towards the end of the season and the last cheeses are being made before they stop, they kind of dry off their animals and they kind of stop the process of cheese making, you might see that the color of the paste will fade a little bit. But again, the paste will kind of in the high seasons of the spring and the summer, you'll see that paste get very bright and golden yellow. Cow's milk particularly can kind of hold on to that beta carotene and really exhibit itself in the resulting cheese. But again, you should be getting a little bit of savory notes on this. Piney, like on the rind of mine in particular, I'm smelling like foresty kind of pine trees and some really unique aromas on the outside of this. Wash rinds oftentimes are characterized by like bacony flavors and savory, smoky flavors. And if you can go to the next slide, Rebecca, thanks to basically the microflora that are flourishing on the rind of this cheese, they've helped develop these flavors. So there's a process that's done to achieve this that nods to what the washed rind cheese family is all about. And basically the rind development is achieved through washing the surface, the outside of the cheese periodically with a brine solution. This classifies the cheese as an external bacterial ripened cheese. You know, again, just like the bloomy rinds, it's ripening from the outside in, but there's a lot of microbes that can give wash rind cheeses these characteristic orange pigments, but there's one bacterium that's studied and talked about so frequently. It's famous for being on the surface of wash rind cheeses. It's notorious for being found in human sweat, like stinky feet, and it's known as Brevibacterium linens. It's a widespread bacterium. It can be found on Grayson, of course, on your Taleggio, your Port Salut, your Munster, whatever you're eating over in your worlds right now. But through this washing and smearing process, it's spread across the rind of the cheese. The bacteria like a moist and kind of briny surface. It's what they love, salt. They love to flourish on that. So it's kind of weekly intervals of washing for this cheese to kind of smear that around. It'll get smellier, the cheese, the rind will get deeper in color, sometimes sticky in some cases. And those bacterial communities are basically consuming the nutrients from the paste of the cheese and giving off these really distinct sensory features that we're noticing right now as we're tasting it. In the case of Grayson, again, those meaty and bacony, kind of even sometimes yeasty notes will come through. And then just to talk a little bit about the aging process of this cheese, there's a lot of biodiversity within the Brevibacteria kind of category. And also just beyond the cheese surface, if you think of the cave environment where cheeses like this are kept, significantly warmer and moister, higher in humidity. In many cases, cheeses that are aged like this, or cheeses like this are aged on wooden boards. They're flipped periodically. They ultimately form a biofilm on the wood, and that kind of transfers from batch to batch. If you think about cave walls, you know, she was talking so much about limestone and porous material. Cave walls have a similar effect on cheese to the wooden boards used in aging. Microbes that form the rind of the cheese, they need somewhere to kind of thrive when the cheese isn't present, right? So if you're looking at the history of caves and cheese aging, a porous surface of limestone is pretty much of equal importance to, again, like temperature and humidity and air exchange and all these other things that we've been talking about. At Murray's, we age in artificial caves, of course. A lot of people do, a lot of cheesemakers, ofteners, such as concrete cave walls. They're made of cinder block and sprayed concrete, ours in particular, and they achieve that same effect. So even though batch separation is, you know, crucial in, you know, cheese aging from a food safety perspective, it's equally as important to ensure that your cave environment is cultivating the desirable bacteria, the kind of microbes that you actually want. And that's what makes cheese aging a really hands-on practice. If that's one thing that you can remember, just know Josh, as well as so many ofteners out there today, they're very hands-on in their work. It's very labor intensive, much like wine. And so just keep that in mind when you're enjoying this cheese.
Remember the labors of our enjoyment. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much. We are going to move on
We have
to, is it Tiffany, right? Yeah, it's Tiffany's turn.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so excited for this pairing. I wish I had the grace, and I'm seeing the comments over here, and it just for me, Viognier is just luxurious and highly aromatic, and it's just really fun. Anytime you have like a wine pairing, if there's a Viognier that you're having to pair food with, it's always just a good time, because there are these like special protein derivatives in the grape flesh cells that are really strong, and they attack the olfactory nerves, and they just really create this like just highly aromatic experience, and the olfactory nerves create a strong impact on the tongue with the flavor too. So it's just, this Viognier is one of my favorite wines to pair with just out of the box food choices. They tend to have like high alcohol and low acidity, and so this just kind of just creates an eccentric wine, generally speaking. They tend to have like lavish fruit flavors. The high alcohol can create like a sense that it's sweet in the brain, but actually you're drinking a dry wine, even though your brain might perceive the highly fruit component and say that it's sweet, but it's actually dry. But things that I would pair it with, if I was going to serve it in a glass, I would choose one with a relatively large volume, so that you can like, move it around and get that complex aromas. A successful meal should include like something that's rich and fairly high fat content. Spicy, salty, smoky are really good components to add to it. Like curries and chutneys are one of my favorite to pair with Viogniers. So like I said, I don't have the Grayson with me here, but I imagine just reading all these comments, I'm very jealous. It sounds wonderful. But one of my also favorite things to do is just something simple, even if it's just a salad, to take broiled shrimp and orange oil and just kind of do that, or some Tex-Mex, but also like the rich, creamy, salty, pungent cheeses that we're trying tonight is also a wonderful thing with Viognier. So the one that we chose in our suggestions is Saban Estate. It's in Amador County. There are actually a few caves in Amador County. If you're looking at a map, it's like maybe southeast of Sacramento, like if you're going to South Tahoe. And there, like I said, there are caves out there, and Viognier is a great variety that it's not uncommon to age it in a barrel. So it could be aged in a cave somewhere. But what I love about this winery is that, so the one thing about cave aging is all about efficiency, energy efficiency, and being environmental friendly. And so creating that, constant temperature, high humid environment without actually maybe having to use glycol, or without having to use some kind of like crazy, electricity bill to create that environment in a normal building. For example, I'm just going to go ahead and use this moment to say, for example, I did the math on like what we like loss in a barrel. Like if you didn't have a humid environment, you would lose about 800 cases per year. Like that's just using the number I used was like a 4-gallon loss per barrel. And like our facility has 400 barrels. And so technically that equates to 800 cases of loss of wine per year if we didn't use things like glycol and electricity to, combat that evaporative loss that happens. This winery actually has solar panels. So on the flip side, even though they don't use, energy efficiency and cool temp, for the cave utilization of caves, they still are very good at energy efficiency, and that the whole winery is covered in solar panels. So, same, but different vein, right? Yeah, so let's go and see what you guys are tasting now, or smelling, or go to what are y'all calling it? The cloud.
Yeah, the
It's like
menti
everybody
pole.
really.
The minty
and it-
pole cloud.
The
It
menti
seems
pole.
like this was the favorite
All right, I've
one.
been drinking 4 wines
Prepared.
now.
Agreed. It's okay, Tiffany. We're all with you. But yeah, I agree, Kathleen. It seems like a lot of people really liked the Grayson. I found it my favorite, if anything, because it was the most exciting, the most surprising. And I
surprising.
personally found of the pairings, this was the most surprising pairing to me. This was the most where
Yeah.
the wine really changed the flavor of the cheese.
Yeah, whoever thought to put these together, you know, was really smart and clever in doing that.
I think that was
And-
It was
Tiffany.
Tiffany.
And Chris.
She's the best.
Awesome.
Tiffany.
Tiffany. Thank you,
Awesome.
Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany. Very cool.
Well, it was Hank at Total Wine and More in Bay Area Boulevard, like Bay Area in Houston, and Chris was there too. We all did it. It's a trio effort, and we nailed it.
Awesome.
So I don't know if any of you guys actually did get the 4 wines from Total Wine and More. Thank you so much. They were very kind and gracious to take us in and do this tasting with us. And we're just thinking that was a good way for everyone to kind of hopefully, you know, taste the same thing. But if you didn't, that's okay too.
I love
So
it.
we're gonna take a quick, just a quick aside here. I would like to, I think there is a Grayson question that Kat would like to throw at Kathleen.
Hello. All right, so I have
And
everyone's
then
been-
we will get back to the originally scheduled program. I apologize for interrupting, but we're just gonna get this one question in.
no worries. I have a great question from my pal Tanya here on the chat. She says, I was pleasantly surprised by the Grayson. I was wondering if the wine would be better with a stronger fish like salmon. And would that go well with it? So any comments on pairing other foodstuffs with the wine that we're trying right now?
Yeah, well, Tiffany, like I'm deferring to you as far as like the weight of the wine, but Viognier is a little bit heavier in weight. Is that correct? As far as like white wines, or is it body lighter?
No, it is definitely heavy and weighted. And I love that. A lot of people don't pick up that like 4th dimension of like just weight on like the sensation on the tongue. I mean, you can smell it, you can taste it, your normal taste buds, but there's more than that. There's in like another elevation where it's a sensation. And I love that. It's a weighted, and that comes with because they love hot climates. We grow a lot of it actually in Texas because of that reason. It is a Rhone variety, a northern Rhone variety, so they do like warmer climates. But because of that, so there's going to be some high alcohol. There's going to be just, it's just the perception of sweetness, but it's actually a dry wine. And so, yes, heavily weighted. And also, like I said, a lot of oak aging on Viogniers is not uncommon. So, yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like a stronger like a stronger white wine can stand up to a cheese that tends to be kind of robust, like Grayson, and a lot of washed rind cheeses such as Limburger and even like Raclette, you could even consider in that category a little bit, but a plus, something that's a little bit stronger, but still kind of creamy, and there's still like an underlying sweetness to the cheese. Maybe it just seems like that's why it goes so well. As far as the fish, yeah, I don't know all my fish that well, but Tiffany, I imagine there would be some fish that would go really well with that wine too.
Yes, no, absolutely. This is the thing. So, like, for example, like if you want to do one of those like head-on fish and like that kind of experience where you can, I saw one picture with these like little plantains that were sauteed plantains and then put like on an open head, like an open fish. And that was like, that's the thing with Viognier. You can have so much fun with pairing it. It can handle so much things. I wouldn't do anything with like mild flavors, just a high fat, high salt. You really can't go wrong. Mead. I love the mead.
Yeah.
Maybe it's reminiscent of mead because of the weight. I think because of the weight of the wine and the low acid. So I'm curious. So Viognier actually does have a lot of low acid. So I don't know if some of your cheeses that we're pairing with what the acidity, like the final acidity level is on them. What that would be, Kathleen.
Lower in, it depends on the cheese, but I would say this one, the Grayson's a little bit lower actually. Like it's not so high. like a
Mhm.
goat's cheese or something like that. It's a little bit lower.
And that could be why there's such a great pairing, because of like a wine spectrum. Viognier tends to have low acid, which also gives that perception of weight on the tongue.
Okay, so it's like a like with like sort of pairing in a way, you could say.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. I hope we answered your question, Tanya. We went really in deep on that one.
Oh, that was
If you
that was
wanted
awesome.
more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So I think
done.
at this point, Tiffany, do you have any more comments on the tasting, or should we go back to the final geology slides? Or do you have any more comments on the wine even? I mean, we still have time for Q&A, but we do have a few more slides.
Yeah, we can hold off. I feel like the geology part of this is really what the reason that's like bringing it all together. So let's spend more time on that, please. Yeah.
We actually don't have anything too in depth. I think at this point we're down to like some fun geology, wine and cave facts. This one's for Chris.
This is because I wanted to show stratigraphy, because you can very rarely or never see stratigraphy with real limestone unless you have marls. So if you look at this outcrop photo, which also happens to be a wine storage cave, you can see the stratigraphy and the layering in the uppermost part of the outcrop, and you can see in the lower portions. This is from the photo is not from the early 1900s, but this is when they start using the cave. So you can see the awesome limestone like massif there. It's beautiful. It's such a perfect limestone outcrop, and you can see that they've actually got wine coming out of it and everything. It's just a really cool photo to show. Like, and these are still in use today. And the next two slides are more photos and illustrations of caves that are in use in Italy, and William's going to talk about those.
Yeah, so I'm a geomorphologist, like a coastal geomorphologist. So it's interesting, like, you know, if you see on the right figure, like the blue lines, like the blue arrow shows like the, you know, where the Tiber River goes now through Rome, like it was going on the back in the just under the Apennines chain, and then, you know, but before all this volcanic activity, you know, you can see like all these red spots. Still talking about the red plot, so the right plot. So it's there was like the red arrow shows where the Tiber River was the delta was. Then, you know, because all, you know, millions of years ago, but then, you know, all this new volcanic area, there was like a violent, really in a, you know, was like in a short time, like it was not like one of like at the Mount Etna in Sicily or other volcanic activity around the world, like, you know, for millions of years, they stuck in the same position. It was like, you know, those volcanic area came out and then stopped. So, and then formally the pyroclastic explosions, like they create a lot of tough area where a lot of caves and mining happened during the Roman Emperor. So you know, at the top of this volcanic crater, like the Romans established 14 towns, and then, you know, the meaning of those towns, like to do like caves and wines to store, like in the cool of those caves, different products, like you know, and still today there's like a Frascati DOC appellation is a blend like for the wine close by Rome, and you know, it's kind of the wine for Rome. And, you know, if you can go on the next slide, this was like just, you know, geomorphology, coastal geomorphology, and caves and wine. So this is like it's an article that I found, like you know, I'm still like I'm an academic, so I'm looking for, like I'm going Google Scholar, Google stuff, and then say like, oh, I want to read this article. So I read this article. It's so cool. Say I want to talk about this article. You know, it's like 18,000 years ago. Like, you know, they went in this cave just accidentally to do like, you know, a trip and, you know, exploration, and they found like those bones like on the floor. Say, what's going on? This? What's, you know, who came here in this place? And then they analyzed and was like, you know, was coming from 8,000 years ago. And then they checked in they found a lot of dust in those bones, and they analyzed, and they found that, like, you know, this was like for essentially wine. There was containing wine. So they, you know, in this region of the Mediterranean, they were like, you know, I think it was, so it's should be like the Copper Age. So during the Copper Age, so people were storing in those caves. And this is, it's also like really interesting because so the temperature again, no lights, and there's like a lot of so it's under the the southwestern Sicily side. So it's so there was like a lot of sulfur coming from the volcanic activity. So and then they think, like this article, if you can find this article, it's from I think University of South Florida. So some scientists like Davide Tanassi, I'm pretty sure like he's Italian because the name and the last name is Italian. So he went there and did some exploration, and he found like and they tried to relate, back like but again, like as Chris said before, there was like in Armenia and other places in the Mid East, there was like the main idea of the age, the most ancient part of the winemakers. But still, like the Greek and like during the Copper Age, there was like a big activity in Sicily too. So I want to share this information. There are links you can copy and paste and read more, because like those are so cool, like to read. Like it's it's unbelievable.
Thank you so much, William. We've been lovingly in the chat calling not just you, but all of us nerds for in the best way possible for this being how we've spent our Friday evening. But thank you so much for sharing that. If you want, William or somebody, if you could drop the link in the chat, that would be the easiest, because these slides are not clickable. That is one of the worst parts of Zoom. Zoom needs to figure out how to make their slides clickable. All right, now with that, we're gonna transition into a little bit of Q&A. I have not been checking my side chat, but I think, Kat, you're probably ready to throw some Q&A at our panelists. I will say at this point, our cheese expert has unfortunately needed to step out to attend to some family duties, but we have shared our cheese expert's email address. This will be available in the recording. If you want the email address, please contact us and we'll share it with you if you have any cheese related questions, but we still have our geologists and our wine experts here. So Kat, do we have any questions from the audience?
You know what, actually all of the questions have been answered in the Q&A. So I'm just trolling the chat here to see if there's anything particularly popping out that is useful to kind of address as a group. Take advantage of these folks. What do you think?
That's okay. How about we skip to the final Menti poll then? Because
Perfect.
I see a lot of people have to leave, and I'm interested in hearing everybody's final answers, and we can come back to Q&A.
Definitely.
Just throwing that at you, Stefano, if you're ready for the final Menti poll question. So the final question was, which was your favorite wine and cheese pairing?
I forgot there was a final question, but here we go.
This is great, man. I think we have a lot of like red wine drinkers in general.
Yeah.
People like red wine, but yeah, this is nice. Gruyere is just an all-around really nice cheese. It's so good for everything. It's very multi-purpose. It's like the fondue cheese, right? That's what people use.
It's such a good cheese. Yeah, it's just such a good cheese.
We could have paired Gruyere with anything and it would have been good.
Yeah,
that was the easiest one.
Yeah.
I'm glad you thought it was amusing. I'm glad you guys all enjoyed it. I'm so glad we had people.
Chris, is the Gruyere the Jacques of all trades?
I'm going to go a little bit off script here, and somebody answer me because I don't know the answer. I usually work in teams. Does Zoom have an ability where you can like raise your hand and I as the host can let people talk? Since we're sort of at the end of our program, maybe people want to ask the questions on their own. Oh my God, hands went up immediately. That was impressive. Okay, allow to talk. If y'all are okay with this, panelists, if I'm going to go ahead and let some people talk. Christine Garbarino, I just gave you the ability to unmute yourself.
I didn't have a question. I was just showing you that you could raise your hand.
You just wanted to talk. That's fine.
Yeah, this was really awesome. It was a very, very well thought out. webinar. So I enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. If there's anybody that does have an additional question or just wants to talk and tell us a really fun fact, like, hey, you went to this cave in Europe and you want to tell us about it, we appreciate hearing. So I'm just going to give it a second.
There is a Christine who has her hand up. Was that?
That's me just.
Is that me?
that's
Do I have to
Oh,
lower
sorry,
my-
guys. Sorry.
And that's okay. I just, threw this out at everybody. And as Kat said, the panelists were amazing at answering the Q&A. And so our Q&A was very long. There are 26 answered questions. So that's really impressive. Thank you, panelists. Then I think, shall we just go ahead to the social hour? Yeah, unless there's anyone here that has anything to say. All right, Kat, you want to describe the social hour to us? Since you set it up for us. You don't
Yeah,
have to. I
sure.
can-
No, it's perfect. It's a lot like Zoom rooms. So where you're with a select group of people. The difference with Wonder Me is you wander from room to room. So you'll see 6 rooms, which all have fun geology and cheese and wine puns. And you basically, once you log in, there's going to be a link posted in the chat. You log on, you give permission. It's very straightforward in your browser for allowing video and audio permissions. And then you just drag yourself from room to room and you can see groups of people kind of gathered in different rooms. And when you get in there, it's a lot like a Zoom private room where you're just seeing everybody and you're chatting. And if people are chatting and you want to move on to a different room, you can just leave. So I think it's pretty straightforward, but yeah, so just click on the link that's going to be posted in the chat. And like I said, you just approve access from your mic and your camera. And then the picture in the lower kind of right-hand corner shows 6 or 7 rooms there. There's Live, Laugh, Lava. There's Igneous's Bliss, a bunch of silly geology, cheese, and wine puns, and they don't mean anything. But for instance, if there's a panelist you want to talk to, like Chris or someone like that, you could just kind of jump in and ask them a question, and it's just like a Zoom kind of private room. So have fun with it. And I think it's fairly straightforward. So that's it, I think.
I can't get over Live, Laugh, Lava. I mean, I'm maybe I'm not in the know, but that's not a pun I've actually ever heard before. And
I know, I thought it was pretty good because Live, Laugh, Love is like, the joke pun that we use all the time. So yeah, I love that one. I'll probably be hanging out in that room later.
I think I saw that at Bed Bath & Beyond. It was one of those signs.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. At this point, as Kat already described, we are done. So I'm going to leave this up here. I will try to periodically drop the link in the chat because that's a lot easier. If you're brave, you can type that link into your browser. Thank you, Stefano. Sorry, I missed it if Kat already said this, but most of you will probably realize that your computers, there's something about the Wonder Room that only allows one platform to use your camera and mic at one point, so you will have to sign out of here in order to sign into the Wonder Room. And a lot of people have issues on their mobile phones, so if you're having issues, try your laptop. The laptop seems to be better. I'm sorry if I just repeated anything Kat said. I was multitasking. All right. See you all there. Cheese you all there? No, that's not good. No,
Good time.
I'm really bad at